I lived in Brooklyn at the time on Lafayette Street. I was off the C train and I was getting ready for a rehearsal. They were doing a musical version of Dirty Dancing. So I was in the middle of rehearsals for that. So the call time was 10 a.m. Near Columbus Circle. So I woke up and showered to get ready. And my best friend was at the house with me. He had been visiting me from Philadelphia. And he called me in and said, "Oh, a plane crashed into the World Trade Center." And I was like, "What, a Cessna plane?" Thinking, this is an idiot not see, it's the World Trade Center. Like, how do you not see that? Like, what's going on? He said, I need to get on the road because they're probably going to shut things down and the traffic's going to be crazy. So he's like, "I'm going to leave, drive back to Philly." And I said, "Well, I gotta get on the train." So went to the C train, stopped at my regular bodega to grab a coffee and like a muffin. Got on the train, platforms were packed because the trains were all backed up, but we all got on the train. It was a regular rush hour and nobody was fazed by it. It just didn't seem real that that's what was happening, that you don't process that as any tragic thing that's happening. I just think the human mind can't really process that that's what's going on. I got on the C train, which regularly stops at the World Trade Center, but they had made an announcement, due to this accident. And I don't even think the train conductors knew at the time. Because of this accident, we're not stopping at World Trade Center. We'll be skipping the stop. So we rolled through the World Trade Center and it was dark. The lights were off and we just kind of creeped through and we're just looking around and kept going. And they let people off on each stop and then finally got to Columbus Circle. And they said, "This is the last stop. We're shutting the trains down. Everybody needs to get off the train." So once I came up the big escalator that comes out of Columbus Circle, I could just see people in the streets. Cars were stopped in the street, and there was a fire truck, and people were standing around the fire truck listening to the radio, and the bars were open, which I thought was strange at 10 in the morning. Why are the bars open and people are drinking at the bars? And I go into one of the bars to watch on the TV to see that the towers that had fallen, that a second plane had hit, and that the Pentagon had also been hit, and that they were looking, and a fourth plane had been hijacked, and they were trying to find it. So all of that happened in that span of me being on the train. And at that point, I still was like, I need to go to the rehearsal hall because I didn't know where to go. Where do I go now? They've shut the trains down. So I walked to, the rehearsals were at John Jay College, which I think is like 60th in Columbus. So I walk to the school and there's people there from the cast, other actors. And they said, "Go home." I said, "There is no going home. They won't let us go home." I guess I'm walking back to Brooklyn. And I stood in line at payphones at this time. There were still payphones in New York at the time because my cell phone didn't work. There was no service. I stood in line. I ran into some actors from the Lion King cast, and they said, "Oh, why don't you come to the theater and make a phone call from the landline there?" So I walked to 42nd Street. Lion King was at 42nd Street at the time. And I went up and I called my family because I thought they need to know that I'm okay. I got in touch with my sister who was crying and, saying, "Where are you?" I said, "I'm at the Lion King Theater. I'm at 42nd Street. Get out. They're saying it's a target, that they may be targeting Times Square. You need to leave." So called a friend and he said to come to his apartment at 15th and 8th. So I walked down there, and as I'm walking down, fire trucks are coming up and away from everything. So I'm walking towards the soot and the ash and the smoke, and people are covered in it because they're walking away from it. They're walking uptown. And that's when it became a reality to me, once I saw people covered in the ash and the fire trucks and the police. And then I stayed there and we watched everything on the news. They went to donate blood because they were looking for people to donate blood. And they got turned away. So they came back and we just all sat around in the apartment. And once they announced it, I got on the train and I went home to my roommate and my friend who never made it back to Philly. He turned around and just came back and stayed with me. And the wind that day was blowing in that direction. So there was debris in my front yard. I lived in like a brownstone. So there was papers and like stuff had flown over and everything was flying over into Brooklyn. So I do remember that.
Flowers all around us and nothing in between us. Two people fall in love in the garden. The sky is royal blue. Past midnight here with you. Your smile makes me high. I twirl my fingers in your hair. You close your eyes, and we both want to realize just why I'm here. It's getting late, tomorrow's near. In the garden, I'll wait for you to show up. I hope you got my message. I hope you know I phoned. In the garden, we're king and queen of the grass, the flowers that they all pass, whatever time of year. You wrap your arms around my waist, forgetting. I'm wondering if I might pass out from your embrace, 'cause how it feels, just how you feel. Come inside, the fire warms us from the cold. I'll pull you closer so I'll hear the words you say. You testify. I justify. 6 a.m. now, I'll catch a cab downtown then. I didn't want a new friend. We can't make a sound. Don't phone me. Don't hold me. Don't break me or you'll own me. Don't phone me. Don't hold me. Don't break me or you'll own me. In the garden, the flowers all around us, and nothing in between us. Two people.
I landed at LaGuardia the night before, late on September 10th. I was on a tour. I'd been gone from the city for months. So it's like, I'm going to go to sleep, wake up, start making my calls, and like let everybody know that I was back in town. Looking forward to playing again. I was living on the Lower East Side with two roommates, and I woke up. They both had. It was a really beautiful day. So we like opened the windows right away. We were on the corner of Ludlow and Stanton. So open the windows, could see the buildings across the street and everything, and turn on the TV. And this was in between when the first plane hit and the second plane. So it was all over the news. But at the time, they were saying it was a small plane and maybe an accident, whatever. And then having the windows open. When I saw on TV when the second plane hit, but I heard it out the window before it hit. TV's on that slight delay. So as I was watching it enter the screen, I heard it out the window. And right then just knew like this was going to be, you know, I don't know, life-changing day event, but didn't really know what to do. One of my roommates called me. He was maybe on the way to the train, but I feel like maybe that call dropped, and then all the cell phones were, you know, unusable the rest of the day. He came back. We decided to go to the bodega to take cash out of the ATM because we didn't know, you know, how long stuff was going to be offline, or and then we kind of sat there just watching the news, sort of in disbelief, the rest of the day. I think at one point, towards the end of the day, I mean, we lived close enough, sort of. I guess it's like 3/4 of a mile, and maybe a 20-minute walk, kind of south and west to get down there. So at one point, we had heard that the firefighters were having trouble with walking on the ash, that their shoes were melting or their boots were melting, or I don't know how true that is. And like information flowed so differently back then when there. Any shoes or socks that we weren't using, and walked down as close as we could get, and just at one point just handed them to a firefighter. And he didn't really look at us or say thank you, or there was just kind of this look that he'd already been through it that day and was in the middle of whatever he had been doing the rest of the day. He just kind of took it and walked away. But yeah, there was this like feeling of wanting to do something, and nobody really knew what to do. That's about the best that we could come up with. But yeah, it was. I think when I think back on that day, the events in the morning, I remember them so clearly, and the rest of the day is just kind of a fog, which is maybe kind of a common thing for people. But yeah, it's one of those things. Obviously, you never forget. The thing about that day is that I remember the initial events so clearly, the window being open, seeing it on TV, hearing it, all of that is crystal clear. The rest of the day is kind of a fog. And the fact that it's been 20 years, which also it simultaneously has flown by, and it feels like an entire lifetime ago, I think has really crystallized a lot of that.
We still made room, even in the worst of times, to hold on to our joy while defending the bloodline. We gained our strength, marching to our own drum, a steadfast rhythm. There was more to come, more to come. Dark sky coming, moonless night, vigilant movement headed to the light. Do we keep on running? Do we keep on hiding out? This time is do or die. It's time to let it ride. We won't run for cover. Just hold on, brother, 'cause this is our time. So let's ride, ride, ride. Freedom didn't come easy. Had to make a lot of noise. Had to keep composure. They won't steal our joy. He set it in motion, a dream worth living for. So we grab our tribe and we're gonna do him right. Dark sky coming, moonless night, a vigilant movement headed to the light. Do we keep on running? Do we keep on hiding low? This time is do or die. It's time to let it ride. We won't run for cover. Just hold on, my brother, 'cause this is our time. So let's run, 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 run. Oh, we're gonna run, run. Do we keep on running? Do we keep on hiding low? This time is do or die. This time we let it ride. We won't run for cover. We're gonna hold on, my brother, 'cause this is our time. So let's ride. We're gonna ride. Ride, ride, ride. We're gonna ride.
So that morning, I was in second grade. I was 7 years old. And we had actually just moved to New York about 2 months before. So it was my first time in a new school. And that specific morning, my parents were on snack duty. And that meant that both of them came to bring the snack, which we would find out later was a blessing. So what I remember from that morning, our elementary school was PS 234. It was only a few blocks away from the towers. And when it happened, we had no idea what was going on. No one did. But I was in my classroom, and one boy in the class saw something from the window. And we all gathered around the window to see what was happening. And we just saw smoke. We didn't have a direct view of the tower, but we knew that something was happening. We knew there was some sort of emergency. Then the principal came on the loudspeaker and told teachers to bring all the students down to the basement because they thought it might have been a bombing. And they told parents if they were still there that they could take their kids and leave. So since my parents were both there, they decided to take me. They went to go get my sister, who was in kindergarten. And then they had to make a really tough decision, which was they decided to take one of our family friends. His name was Ian. He was a couple years older than me. But his mom, they didn't have cell phones at the time, and she was working, and she was in Brooklyn, and they knew that she might not be able to get to him in time. So they had to make this decision whether or not they're going to take him, and they decided that they would. So we took Ian, and we went out as a family. And the plan originally was to go to our apartment, which was at the time at the South Street Seaport, but everything was blocked off. So they told us, you just have to go north. And we went in this huge crowd of people, and that's what I remember the most. It's just the crowd of people, the smoke, the chaos. And we just walked and walked and walked. And finally, we made it to my dad's offices, and that's where we rode out the rest of the day. And then after that, I don't remember much. I do remember I was 7, so I was drawing pictures of everything that was happening, trying to process things. And I was talking to my dad about it, and I said, someone must really hate America so much if they wanted to do this. And I was trying to wrap my head around why this would be happening. And yeah, that's what I remember from that day. I think when I've been reflecting on my memories recently, it's been coming up during COVID because I was nannying 2 kids who were around the same age as I was then. And when we were with them, when they were outside of school and something was happening in the world that was difficult to explain, it really reminded me of that time. And I kept on having flashbacks actually this past year. So like some of the other people said, it feels like it was yesterday. Like when I think about that morning, it feels like it was yesterday, but then I also realized it was 20 years ago. I'm an adult now. I was 7 at the time. So yeah, that's what I remember.
First week of school, we all sat in a room when we saw something fall from the sky. We gathered around, watched it come down, wished that I'd covered my eyes. Most of the time, I still feel like that kid scared out of my mind, watching as the world comes crumbling down. Fell asleep on the school bus, woke up to find 20 years of my life had gone by. Just the other week, I watched through the screen as bodies fell from the sky. Most of the time, I still feel like that kid scared out of my mind, watching as the world comes crumbling down.
I was working as a paralegal at Marsh and McLennan Companies, and their offices were on 46th Street and 6th Avenue. And the morning of 9/11/2001, I was making my time as I always did, getting on the subway and getting to work, usually late. And that day I got off the train. It seemed pretty, like nothing out of the ordinary. I got into my workspace on the third floor, and there was a weird energy and like a lot of movement and activity, and people kind of, in shock. And somebody mentioned, "Did you hear a plane hit the tower, one of the Trade Center towers?" And it didn't really register. Like I couldn't really make sense of it as like a global situation or like something that wasn't just like an accident. I didn't really even consider that it was an act of terrorism. It just didn't even enter my mind. But I just remember calling my girlfriend at the time and saying, "Did you hear the plane hit the towers?" And the only way you could really see it at that time was to watch it on television. I just remember being glued to the scenes of those towers. And then I went upstairs to the 32nd floor of the building, and which is where the cafeteria was. And I had a straight shot down 6th Avenue from the windows, and I could see, the buildings on fire, smoke billowing out. Still didn't know how to make sense of it. And I left, and I'm glad that I didn't see it fall. That's where I was in the morning when I found out that the planes had hit, and that then I quickly found out that they had hit primarily the floors that my company was occupying, and sadly it ended up that they lost the second most amount of people out of any company in the bombing. So it was a strange experience to be right in the center of, that happening at that company at that time.
Tom, get your plane right on time. I know that your part'll go fine. Fly down to Mexico. Da 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 da. Here I am, the only living boy in New York. I get the news I need on the weather report. Yes, I can gather all the news I need on the weather report. Hey, I got nothing to do today but smile. Da 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 da. Here I am, the only living boy in New York. Half of the time we're gone, we don't know where, we don't know where. Only living boy in New York. get your plane right on time. I know that you're eager to fly now. Hey, yeah, let your honesty shine, 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 shine. Da 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 da. Let it shine on me. Yeah, the only living boy in New York. The only living boy in New York. The only living boy in New York. The only living boy in New York.
So, I was a senior at the University of Richmond, and I had just come back from about 8 or 9 months of being abroad in Italy. So it was my first semester back. I was 21, and I'm from a really small town, so it was kind of like my first real foray into the world and to see bigger places and understand more of how people felt about Americans abroad. You know, it started to kind of chip away at some of the ideas I thought about who we are in the world, I guess. And so it was a really formative time for me. And it was a beautiful morning. I mean, like perfect, crystal clear blue sky. I got up really early because I had an exam that day. And I'd been studying, I'd been reading. All my roommates were gone. And so I had like the house to myself that morning, and it was great. And I was walking to class across campus, and I was whistling. And I had like a Nokia cell phone, so I hadn't turned it on. I only turned it on to call my parents, I think, at that time. Hadn't looked at the computer or anything, or news or TV. So I was whistling, and a friend stopped me and she said, you look really happy. I don't think do you know what's happened? And I was like, no. And she was like, well, come with me. And so we walked through the Commons, and we were right there, and there were people crowded around TVs all over the Commons and at the university. People were crying. People were just like staring in disbelief. And I saw the second plane hit because they were filming it live at that point. And it was just total shock and disbelief. My uncle was working downtown at that time. I had 2 cousins and my aunt and uncle that lived in Manhattan that I would go see frequently. And so no one knew how to get in touch with him. We were all calling frantically trying to get in touch with him. He ended up walking from like Wall Street all the way back to 74th and Lexington, took him hours. So no one, he found like someone let him borrow a phone or something and called to let us know he was okay at some point during that day. But I'm getting ahead of myself. I mean, because there was so much dissonance between this like beautiful day, perfect fall day, and this like unthinkable tragedy. And it was one of the first experiences of that in my life where, like, honestly, sometimes even on these like really beautiful fall days, I'll still get that kind of nauseated feeling that I had. It's like an association because it was so strong for me. I didn't know what to do. I mean, we all sat talking, not really talking, just like being together felt right. So I walked to the class I was going to, and it was like a class on the history of work in Europe. And I said, this just feels totally ridiculous for us to try to hold class. I mean, I don't know how you guys feel, but I feel like it's almost disrespectful. And everybody, so then we ended up just kind of sitting and talking to each other for a few minutes, and then we all went back. And the rest of the day was just like walking through a dream, like a nightmare, where I don't quite remember exactly what we did. There were planes and helicopters overhead all day long. probably because of our proximity to DC and different like armed force bases and stuff around the area. But it was a moment I think everybody knew that it was seminal for us, and it that nothing would be the same going forward. I think that was, even when people tried to just kind of walk through the days, I think it was just it was so bizarre and tragic. But it was a real sea change after that, I think, for all of us.
Te creo, aunque falte en tu voz sinceridad. Tiemblo de verte y tú sin verme. Tu mirada vacía que me habla, volúmenes día tras día. Te creo, aunque falte calor en tu tocar. Mano en mano me acostumbré al invierno de tu pensar. Tranquilo infierno de contigo estar. Te creo, aunque falte respuesta en tu hablar. Error quererte, peor no amarte. Y mueve roca en el mar, que mi corazón nadando nunca alcanzará. Recuerdos de algo que no vi, dolor que ríe al consumir, vacío al que yo confiado, contento y corriendo un día caí, sufriendo por mi presumir de ti, no puedo desistir, perdido en ese mar me falta solo esperar contigo un día morir. Te creo, aunque falte calor en tu tocar. Mano en mano me acostumbré al invierno de tu pensar. Tranquilo infierno de contigo estar. Recuerdos que no vi, dolor que ríe al consumir, vacío que yo confiado, contento y corriendo un día caí. Sufriendo por mi presumir de ti, no resistir, perdido en ese mar me falta solo esperar contigo un día morir. Te creo.
I was living downtown DC near the zoo, so in an area called Mount Pleasant. I had gotten up early that morning, which was, not normal for me. But I had gotten up early because I had taken a friend to drop him off at school, UDC. And on the way home, I had this. When I did that, I was called my nana, my grandmother, just to check in. And I remember calling her and just like normal, oh hi, how are you? And she's like, oh. And it was probably early. It was early. I'm not sure of the time. I don't remember the times of when everything happened, but it was like, oh, are you listening to the news? You know, I kind of had NPR on, but I wasn't focused. And I remember they were talking to someone who was, you know, and then I started to listen. I was like, oh, whoa, you know, like they were in that moment talking to like on the phone with someone who was either in the building that it just got hit, or I think the building, whichever building was second, like across the way, and they were looking out the window and they were reporting, like we have so and so on the phone, and they see flames, and you know, everyone at that, I mean, the whole day everyone was speculating, right? What in the world? And so I'm on the phone and we're talking, and so got back to my home, and just remember, you know, I had roommates, a bunch of roommates, and we, you know, everyone's sort of waking up because we're in our 20s and nobody gets up early, and we're all artists, so we slowly, everyone wakes up and starts to realize what's happening, and someone had a little TV. We didn't have a little TV, and we, you know, I just remember, you know, you slowly start to realize what's happening, you know, and some of us have the radio on and we start to call, you know, start to try and call people. And I just remember the situation just escalating so fast, like within that minute, the time that, you know, that moment I was driving home, and then I got home, and then it was just like, I think by then the building had fallen, like no one knew what happened. You know, it was just like, there's more planes coming, and there's one headed for DC. Of course it's headed. Of course there's a plane headed for DC. I mean, why not? I mean, DC's the capital. So I remember like, well, we're in DC and we're very close to, I feel like, a target. And I was like, well, what do I do if there's a plane that starts, what do I run? Like, where am I going to run to? I mean, it was really just mass confusion in my head. And once the Pentagon got hit, I feel like that was the plane that they're like, there's a plane headed, or no, the plane that went, the other plane that crashed in Pennsylvania. I feel like that was the plane that was going to come to DC, or it didn't, or it circled, or something weird. I've never gone through anything like this. I've never experienced that, and I never have since.
Yeah, I had definitely gotten up early that morning. At the time, I was doing decorative interior painting in the West End in Richmond, Virginia, and I had reached my client's house and set up everything. Had just begun to paint, and I would always get there before, you know, they would kind of wake and leave the house. And I knew her husband was already gone, but so I'm painting. And I hear sobbing. And I, you know, put down my brush and kind of tiptoed my way through the kitchen into the living room where, you know, just followed the sound. And, you know, I asked her if she was okay. Is everything okay? And after I got no response was when I looked at the TV. And I'll never forget that image on the TV, and something so massive, you know, I think for most people, definitely for me, it just doesn't register right away. You know, like when you lose a loved one, it's just like really, you know. So I remember seeing the TV, and I remember my first thought. It's kind of ridiculous, but my first thought was, oh my God, it's one of my favorite monuments in the world being destroyed. Seconds later, you know, when I looked at her face and just saw the tears rolling down, is when it hit me like the massive loss of human life that was surely to happen that morning. And then it hit me, you know, my friends in New York, and tears, my hairs are standing up, but tears welled up in my ears. And once again, I said, you know, are you okay? Can I go get you anything? She's like, no, I'm fine, thank you. And I remember grabbing my stuff and, you know, quick as I could, and went home. And really the rest of the day is a blur. What I did, you know, who I was with, where I went. But I was reminded of the feeling that I had that day last year after the initial lockdown, because of the pandemic. I remember my first time that I left the house after I'd been in the house. I don't know how many days we've been in the house, but to go somewhere to get something. I forgot what it was. But just this feeling in the air, just something thick and uncertain and, weird in the air. And I remember that day last year and then thinking that's how I felt that day. It took a while for it to hit, everything to hit. And then, and then everything settled in, like the worrying about the friends and who can I call? This is back before I had a cell phone, certainly. But yeah, that's what I remember is where I was and the feeling that I had for the rest of that day after the shock, which took only seconds to, for the shock to turn into sadness.
Desde que tú ya no estás, la mente se me ha vuelto a comportar y el odio no se confundirá con amor, con pasión, con deseos de quedar. Espiritual y carnal, mi cuerpo ya no se gastará y el dolor no volverá a hablar de traición, de perdón, de namilla libertad. Hiedra venenosa en el jardín, la falta de mi bien será tu fin. Débil, frágil tus raíces, cicatriz, de la cual ya está sanando mi vivir. Aurora ven a pura ya, bendición, ella lejos quedará. Y al hablar ya me comprenderán, sin error, sin temor, mostraré sinceridad. Hiedra venenosa en el jardín, la falta de mi bien será tu fin. Débil, frágil tus raíces, cicatriz, de la cual ya está sanando mi vivir. Y ahora que el alma encontrará esa paz, no me resistirá. Y ojalá una fuerza me vendrá, con la cual otra hiedra mi cariño evadirá. Una fuerza con la cual otra hiedra mi cariño evadirá. Una fuerza con la cual otra hiedra mi cariño evadirá.
My day on 9/11 started in Brooklyn. I was coming into Manhattan. I worked on Spring Street, just between 6th Avenue and Varick Street. And I was on the C train coming in from Brooklyn, and you come through Lower Manhattan. And when the train came through, like the World Trade Center, people were getting on they were holding the doors, running on the train, and they just looked shell shocked. And I'm just thinking, what the hell? You know, there's always another train. Why is everyone holding the doors? Not knowing what. And then 2 stops later, I get off at Spring Street, and I'm coming up the steps, and you can see the towers, and I see like a fire, and then I see what I didn't know what it was. I thought it was a fireball jumping to the next building. Apparently, it was a plane hitting the tower. I was like, what in the hell is going on? And then everyone's like crossing the street. Everyone's just looking up. And I worked on Spring Street, and everyone was standing in front of the building looking at this fire. So I had to work. I was the receptionist for Country Road Clothing, an Australian company. And I go upstairs, and people who had gotten there earlier, people were giving bits and pieces of information. And so the phones were ringing off the hook. So people calling saying they can't get in, they weren't stuck in the tunnel. People's parents were calling. I called my parents, I called my grandmothers. They were telling me what they were seeing on the news because we couldn't get any news, and it was very sporadic, whatever news was coming. I remember it being a gorgeous day. It was like, I wish I didn't have to work that day. I had on all black, and I was thinking, well, when I have my lunch break, I'm going to go out. But something didn't feel right. Of course, when I'm in the office, we're starting to hear bits and pieces of stories from phone calls that were coming in, and everyone was just kind of panicking. But we were told to just stay where we were. And some people made it in, some people didn't, but everyone who made it in was totally shell-shocked. And at some point, you could see the towers burning, and you could see debris flying out of what we thought was debris falling. It was actually people jumping out of the buildings. And it was not far from where we were on Spring Street with the vantage point that we had. And at some point, the CEO invited us all those of us who were still there, into the conference rooms to say, look, this is a crazy day. Everybody should just go home and get home safe. He's looking at us. We're facing the window, and one of the towers falls. Everyone's just screaming. And it was just smoke and debris, and we didn't know what was happening. So I remember just leaving like everybody else. And I lived nearby. I had a place that I could go to that was nearby. And walking out up Varick Street, you could see people coming north from there, covered in ashes. There was this smoke and dust flying everywhere, police cars coming up. Everything was just covered in this white ash, and all you heard was sirens going off. And that was how I remember the morning of 9/11. Yeah. It was pretty awful. And for it to be 20 years later, it seems like it was just the other day. Mother, mother, there's too many of you crying. Brother, 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 there's far too many of you dying. You know we've got to find a way to bring some understanding here today. Father, Father, we don't need to escalate. War is not the answer, for only love can conquer hate. You know we've got to find a way to bring some understanding here today. Picket lines and picket signs, don't punish me with brutality. Talk to me so you can see what's going on. What's going on? What's going on? What's going on? Father, Father, everybody thinks we're wrong. Who are they to judge us simply cause we wear our hair long? You know we've got to find a way to bring some understanding here today. Picket lines and picket signs don't punish me with brutality. Come on and talk to me so you can see what's going on. What's going on? What's going on? What's going on? Father, we don't need to escalate. War is not the answer, for only love can conquer hate. You know we've got to find a way to bring some understanding here today. Picket lines and picket signs don't punish me with brutality. Come on and talk to me so you can see what's going on. What's going on? I need to know what's going on. Ooh, what's going on?
I was living in Brooklyn, in Carroll Gardens, which is Brooklyn Heights, Red Hook area. And I was actually I worked as a temp at the World Financial Center across the street from the World Trade Center. I would do these 2-week stints working for different secretaries there when they went on vacation. And the morning of 9/11, I got up and got ready to go to work. And they called me and said, you know what, she's back in town, so don't bother coming in. So I was awake, and we heard the plane hit. Brooklyn is directly across the river. We heard a really loud noise, and we turned on the TV, and it was just it was hard to process what was happening. And so I don't think we really thought much of it. We thought that maybe some joyriding, rich guy in his Cessna had hit the building. And then the second plane hit, and we really felt everything shake. And I thought, his and hers Cessnas sounds like a real impossibility, but nobody could figure out what was going on. And when it started to become, you know, the whisperings of a terror attack became louder, of course, everybody started to panic. And then as I remember when the buildings actually fell, it rained debris and papers down Henry Street like a snowstorm. And just millions of pieces of paper in the air. And there were workmen outside. And I just remember that they were huddled because they didn't know what was happening and they didn't have anywhere to go. And they were huddled and they were covered in ash. And it looked like they had been standing in a snowstorm for 2 hours. They were just covered. And I called out and invited them in. And I remember one turned around and looked at me. He just stared at me, and they just didn't say. Everybody was shocked. I did have one piece of paper that I picked up off the ground. It was a memo that I put in a book and saved. And then I do remember all of New York immediately thinking, what can we do? What can we do? And there was huge lines at the blood banks. People were showing up, trying to show up at the site with shovels and blankets and whatever they could to try and help. So I think it went from complete shock to action. And I know that night I heard a lot of stories of people walking home and, people not knowing if people were okay. My mom couldn't get through to me for hours and hours, and she knew that I worked across the street from the World Trade Center, so she was despondent. And it turns out all the people that I worked with had gone to the, you couldn't get on the train, so all the people that I worked with at Merrill Lynch ended up just walking downtown until they got to the bottom of the island, and they waited. And the buildings fell, and it was odd. I went back to work there at the financial center. It was for a company that made a big show of opening in October. And the pit was still burning. And the people that I worked with had been there, and had been about 5 weeks prior. So these poor people were having to show up to work, walk through the pit, and the guys were already selling the books of all the pictures. They still sell them down there. I think it's like all the worst gory pictures and the impact of the planes, and they're trying to sell them to the people who worked there, because you had to have a certain ID to even get through there. And there was nobody in the office, and I was just listening to internet radio, this cognitive dissonance of, listening to these new records on this radio station, enjoying myself while these people, now we know, were just getting sicker and sicker working in this pit, trying to find bodies. And all the people that I worked with, I certainly never wanted to bring it up with them, but I thought, how can they do this? And I'm just amazed at how strong human beings can be to come back to work after what they experienced. It's hard to believe that it's been 20 years and to still not really know how to feel about it, and to just think about all those people disappearing all at once. And the people that I know who since then, who maybe were there and didn't make it because they got sick later, or I have some friends that committed suicide or overdosed because of the PTSD. I mean, how do you process that? And I think that's such a similar time with COVID, because people just disappear. And how do you memorialize that? At the time, I was touring with a band called Hem, And we were scheduled to go to the UK to do a tour, and we just released a record. And I was sure that we wouldn't go. I believe we went in November. And it was so interesting because everybody wanted to talk about it. You know, every club owner, bartender, door guy, every interview was, they wanted to talk about politics, they wanted to talk about war. And of course, we can't not talk about that stuff. It felt really inappropriate for a bunch of musicians to be postulating about something that was so unprecedented for us in this country. Luckily, I still feel that way about a lot of things. It's not that I don't have opinions, but I think that opinions can be poisonous. And it was a tough time to not necessarily have an opinion as a musician or to not broadcast an opinion, but just to talk about feelings and say we're really afraid and we're really sad and we know a lot of people are going to die. Never on this side of the grave again. On this side of the river. On this side of the garner of the grain. Ever as time flows on and on and on and on and on. Narrow, noiseless river. Ever wild corn boughs, heavy-headed one. Never despairing, often feigning ruin, but looking back, I'll never faint, yet pursuing, faint, yet still pursuing.
might not mind if I slow down and I lose. Guess I just get tired of waiting to feel alright. Maybe that's alright. I got a whiplash fascination with 1,000 ways to let you down. Sit here poking at my bruises. Maybe that's alright. Maybe it's alright. Sweet as snow, stick like a key in the throat. Can't finesse one single yes, and that's alright. That's alright. Home is so complicated. I rattle when I wanna settle down. Sleepyhead fills up with sparrows all night. Alright. Sweet as snow, stick like a pea in the throat. This emptiness is mine, I guess, and that's alright. That's alright. It's alright. Lately, oh, just maybe I'll take my chances as I'm falling. The vines unwind until I find there's flowers in my wake. If life was fair, I'd be in trouble.